In this interview, I'm talking with Curtis Jones about getting out of your comfort zone and traveling the world. This is TWiP. Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of This Week in Photo. I am your host, Frederick Van Johnson. Today on the show, I'm talking with an intrepid, globe-trotting photographer who travels the world doing things that you and I probably only dream about doing in our lives. His name is Curtis Jones. He's an accomplished photographer. He's been published in a myriad of magazines, including National Geographic and others. He travels the world. In fact, he's preparing for an upcoming trip to Antarctica to do what we're going to find out in this interview. But Curtis Jones, man, welcome to This Week in Photo. How's it going?
Great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's good to have you. So I'm excited I love talking with photographers like you that are actually doing the do versus just talking about doing the do and obsessing over the latest and greatest drone or a camera body or a lens that's, 0.015 f-stop faster than the last one, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
They're actually beating up their gear. Photographers that beat up their gear have more respect than photographers that dust it off every now and then. So I want to start with just sort of your origin story and what led Curtis Jones from wherever you were before to where you are now in the world of photography.
So my origin is that I grew up pretty much in the countryside and like doing a lot of things outdoors in the woods, in nature. My whole family, extended family, was very much into being outside, and so I spent a lot of time doing that. And if I wasn't doing that, I was just being pretty creative. Like any kid, sketching and drawing and painting and stuff like that, making up stories. But then as I got a little older and started considering what I was supposed to do with my life, I got into the stream of university and academics. And I actually went to school and pursued a pharmacy degree, which I have, and worked for about 11 years full time. Well, a little bit towards the end, not so much full time, but 11 years doing pharmacy. And so that's what I was doing before I started doing this, which is, photography and travel and trips and fun explorations and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that transition because that's quite the leap, right? So
yeah,
I talk to a lot of photographers and both on and offline, and that's one of the questions, like, what's your path? What is your origin story? And a lot of times, if they're, they weren't like, I was interested in photography when I was 5 years old and now I'm, accomplished photographer. But usually I was in corporate, I got bored with my job, cubicle, whatever, burned out. And then I decided to reset and make a go of this career. But very rarely do I hear of someone like yourself that was a pharmacist. You're like full-on pharmacist for, would you say a decade? A better part of a decade,
yeah,
right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah, a better part of a decade, and then you hit the switch and went to a career that, I don't want to say it's the antithesis of pharmacy, but it is. There aren't very many parallels between pharmacy and photography, other than the P in there.
Yeah, there's a P and there's an H, and then
yeah. So what was the genesis of that move? Were you sitting there like, filling up pill bottles, and one day you're like, you know what, screw this, I'm picking up a camera and I'm going to Botswana. How did that happen?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you should say that, but I was actually. From the moment that I sort of graduated and started working full time, I kind of knew that it wasn't something that I was going to stick with forever, but it did allow me at the time to do something else that I loved, which was to travel and to seek out smaller sort of remote areas. So a lot of the jobs that I took were in small communities, a little bit off the beaten path, and eventually I ended up moving to northern Canada on Baffin Island in Nunavut, which is a territory. It's our largest territory. It's actually like a third the landmass of the country, so it's huge. But it's there aren't a lot of people, but there was a pharmacy position open, so I applied for that job and moved up there. basically seeking out like something that's a little more adventurous. And it was a pretty good work-life balance. I got to be outside. I got to do a lot of fun things. I like to do like some really great northern cold weather stuff at the same time practicing pharmacy. But it got to the point where, on my lunch break, I would sit and look at a stack of pharmacy journals that were like up to here. And then I'd look over to the other side and it'd just be like, the one photo magazine that happened to be in the pharmacy on the rack that I had swiped and brought back to the lunchroom. And so I knew that all my focus was going towards that one photo magazine and not like the pharmacy journals that I should have been paying attention to. So I knew at that point that, I had to make some decisions and change things.
And that's the bravery that comes into that, just that the comfort of what I would assume is a fairly comfortable job being a pharmacist to the relatively unknown wilderness, both figuratively, and literally of what you're doing now. Like a lot of photographers would be like, I'm just gonna make a go of this. Maybe I'll go shoot some weddings and some portraits, and and they do their spreadsheet and like, well, if I shoot this many weddings a year, I can make this much money, and that replaces my normal income. Did you do that kind of math? Was that behind it?
That math would have been way smarter. I didn't do any of that. I legitimately I went out with some friends. I don't know if it was like the next night or a couple nights afterwards. And the thing that kind of like was the crescendo of pushing me out of pharmacy. Well, I had a friend who, with her brother, was going to travel across Greenland. So they were going to ski and kite ski or snow kite. And I don't know if you're familiar with that, but no. It's large sails that you put up in the air, and you pull these sleds behind you with all your equipment and gear and stuff like that. And they've been doing this kind of stuff before, and they're really well accomplished. I mean, they're world-class polar explorers. So they were going to make this trip in Greenland, and we were out and we were having a few drinks, and they were telling me about it. And then she says that, well, the third person on our team had to drop out. So there's like, and she's like, you should do it. And I was thinking,
And you just pulled the trigger and said, yeah, I'm
okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, I said yes, but then I just chalked that up to like having a few drinks. But then the next day I was like, no, I actually think I'm going to go through with this. And yeah, so that's when like I guess the real work began, and I had to figure out how to make that change. And because it was basically a span of maybe 3.5 months, something like that, between closing up shop with the pharmacy and skiing across Greenland.
And how do you prepare for something like that? Because I'm assuming, well, you had to have some sort of experience doing that, right? Because the normal mortal would be like, you know what, I'm not trying to die right now, so I'm not going out there without lots and lots of research, or without a guide, or
I had a lot of
or some sort of comfort out there. Did you have any sort of extreme adventure sport experience before pulling trigger on that?
I watched a lot of videos, and the biggest thing was that the two people I was going with, my friends Sarah and Eric, I got really close to them and to their family, and sort of like the way they live their life and the kind of trips they do. I hadn't been on those sorts of trips myself personally, but I had grown up, like I've mentioned before, being outside in the wilderness, camping and hiking around, and scrambling up trees and swimming in rivers and stuff. So
yeah.
But yeah, something this big, like 50 plus days of packing and planning and carrying everything, and trying to figure out the distance you have to travel each day, and evacuation plans if and when necessary, and pick up points along the way if something goes wrong, and all that kind of stuff. The logistics of getting all that stuff to like Greenland to start,
Yeah.
The benefit that I had was that these two people that I was with had done trips like that before. So
okay. Yeah.
As far as like my first trip goes, I leaned pretty hard on those guys in like getting ready. But that didn't mean, I was still up, 6 a.m. every morning skiing, pulling, sleds with weight, dog food in the back before work kind of thing, just to, because I had never really skied before.
Wow. You were brand new. You just went out there, threw yourself into the fray and figured it out, right? I mean, and, like you said, you were working with a safety net of people that had done that before.
Yeah.
But still, I mean,
yeah. But so the issue there wasn't so much that I wasn't so worried about like my safety, because I knew I had those two people. I mean, stuff can still go wrong. You can still get separated from your group and all that kind of stuff. But my bigger concern was not being prepared enough to be like a strong member of the team, so that if something happened to one of them, I could do the same for them.
Right.
So that was like the focus of the months leading up for me, was just putting myself in a position where I wasn't too much of a strain on them, but also if something went wrong, I could be part of the solution and not more of a problem. So
right, you don't want to be a burden. You actually want to be a benefit to the team. Hence, team. Right. Yeah. Exactly. Let's switch gears a little bit, because I'm really curious about when you planned for that trip. Obviously, was sort of the big bang of everything you're doing now and got you started. But fast forward to now, and you're like you mentioned in the intro, you're planning and taking folks on exotic adventures around the world, and you're that guy. You went from being, hopefully I'm not a burden to these other two people, to I am now leading a group of people and making sure everyone's safe and everyone is learning and getting great pictures and all that. When you're planning something like that, one of these adventures, how do you put it together? Like, how do you determine what the location you're going to hit, and then how do you put people in there and get them there? I'm really curious about the logistics behind something like that.
So again, it comes down to a lot of teamwork. I work with a company called Offbeat Photo, and these guys, the two guys that run this business, they spend a lot of time involving people, not just myself, but other photographers and guides, and we're a pretty strong community, and we all have backgrounds in different areas, and so you kind of play to those strengths. So one of my backgrounds in my areas are these sort of remote location experiences. I'm not going to be the guy that gets the shoulder tap for the beauty portraits in a Scottish castle kind of thing. But if you need somebody to get you through sand dunes in Mongolia, then that's where I'll come in. And so basically prepare for things like that. We scout the locations, and we essentially do the trips ourselves first.
Like a practice run kind of thing?
Yeah, and then work with like local guides and logistics providers and things like that, and iron out all the kinks and potential. Where it's kind of like you do enough of this stuff, and you can see where potential trouble can be, and we also know our clients pretty well, I think. So we know the kind of people that we're bringing to these places and what they can hope to do and expect to see and stuff like that. So there's a lot of like managing expectations. And then the biggest thing is just keeping, a pretty open mind and being super flexible, because things change all the time, especially in other, on these international destination types workshops.
And when I talk to some photographers about when they're leading workshops, and one of the common things that I hear is that they'll have people that overpack or bring too much gear, whether it's photography gear or otherwise, on the trip with them, and then they regret it during the trip. What's your advice to people that are coming on either your adventure or going on other adventures, in terms of what do you bring? Camera gear? Is it the bare minimum, or are you Batman and you prepare for any kind of situation that you might be thrust into?
Yeah, I'm probably more minimal gear as opposed to Batman, although I wouldn't mind having a bat suit sometimes. But I guess if people ask me directly, and sometimes we'll get those questions before going on these trips, and usually I try to get people to answer the question of, like, if you were there and you didn't have a camera, would you still want to be there?
Oh, yeah.
And so if just thinking about it in terms of the experience and not just, documenting something, helps sometimes with like taking, because I feel like there's a great pressure for people to need to bring every piece of kit that they have just in case, the perfect moment, and they don't have the perfect lens with the perfect filter.
Exactly. Yeah.
All that kind of stuff. And so it's like, it sticks in their chest and they can't get past that. Right. So there's a whole bunch of anxiety that comes with like packing the right stuff. But if you think about it in terms of like, would you be okay if you were there and, your gear didn't make it and you just had your iPhone? You'd probably, you'd be upset, but you'd still have an experience that you could enjoy. So for the most part, I tell people to bring what they think they're going to use. And if they're really like, wavering, I ask them, is there a specific, photographs that you're trying to take? So if you're going to Antarctica and you want, the iris of a Gen 2 penguin and you have a 600 millimeter prime, yeah, you should probably bring it.
Yeah.
If you're more interested in like, just being out there and experiencing what comes up and getting these broader sort of like slices of Antarctica and stuff like that, and you still have that huge lens, but you really don't care if you get the perfect wildlife shot, then, maybe you don't have to bring that lens, because it is like a lot of hassle.
Yeah, it's weight, right? Every ounce counts, right?
And so, but those photographers that do bring those lenses or pieces of gear, they go there with a lot of purpose and intention to get certain shots, versus someone like myself who might go there and as long as I have a range somewhere, between the wide and 200 or 300, I'm set for a trip like Antarctica for the most part.
Now, do you recommend that your travelers or attendees and the photographers that come in your workshops, do you recommend that they have a shot list? Like you mentioned, getting the iris of the penguin or something. Should they come with, okay, let's do some research and look at the area where we're going, and these are the shots that I want to get, and then go for those shots? Or is it more serendipitous? Just, hey, I'm in this cool location, let me see what I find.
Yeah. I guess, again, it comes down to personality. Like everybody's a little different about how they approach photography and the experience. I've gone both ways. Like, so for more commercial work, I'm going to do way more research. I'm going to like storyboard things. I'm going to Google Map, image search, figure out location and use like apps to, see where the sun's going to be, or, where it'll be setting and coming up and things like that. Because there are specific photographs that need to be, to your best effort that you need to get. If I'm going on a trip where it's more about me and, the experience of going somewhere and being in a place and just kind of letting it wash over you, mm-hmm. I usually don't. I don't plan for anything specific. So the first time I went to Antarctica, I had two friends who went before me, and they had amazing work. And I was looking at their stuff leading up to my trip. And it got to a point where I was like, well, I don't know if I can shoot anything better than what they've already done. Mm-hmm. And I don't really want to repeat what they've done. So I'm going to stop looking at other people's stuff. So for the last couple months leading up to the trip, I didn't look at any photos of the areas that I was going or what other people had done before. And instead what I did, because I have like a keen interest in, the exploration history of these places and this globally and polar regions in particular, I just started like diving into a lot of books and accounts from like the early 1900s and things like that, and reading what it was like and looking at some of the images that were created back then, which was kind of a cool time, and it was like an interesting mindset to get into before going down. To not have, your phone with the photos that you saved or had seen on Instagram that you could like refer to and try to be like, okay, this is the one I want to take here.
Yeah.
It was more like, someone had been on this beach before and, I have a general idea of the history of this place and the wildlife. And so it was more, I was still sort of preparing myself, but with less sort of like precise visual sort of cues.
Yeah. No, I like that. Yeah, sort of keep your palette relatively clear so that it can better discern the flavor of the place that you're going to.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the downside of not doing anything at all and just like hitting the beach is that some of these places are so overwhelming that people just start like a deer in the headlights. So.
I can't imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I wanted to switch gears a little bit and talk about, and dive deeper into the trip itself. So, one of the things that I would imagine a lot of people have concerns about when going on one of these sort of exotic adventures is, of course, safety, but also health. Like assuming the person that's going is in perfect health, that's great. But if they're not in perfect health, or something strikes, or they get some weird bug that their white blood cells aren't ready to, to go after, how do you account? What's the flow for preparation, as well as if something happens, then how do you address it when you're in the field?
So a lot of the places aren't so remote that you can't get some form of medical help relatively quickly for the times that or at least not for the entire trip. So there will be like segments that might be a couple days where you're not really close to a smaller town or community or something like that. So in those cases, we just you make sure you know where those buildings and where those people are. In more remote or extreme cases, most of the time there are people on staff. Well, all the time there are people on staff that have like first responder training.
Okay.
So I personally have like wilderness first aid and stuff like that. And there are other people who have other types of different levels and degrees.
I was going to say, what better person to have on a trip with you is someone with pharmaceutical training.
Yeah.
So you should be good to go, right?
Yeah. And so, I mean, that's reactionary stuff. But obviously you need to have people on site that can at least stabilize or just do like what needs the triage of the event if something, heaven forbid, happens. But
yeah.
The other side of that is making sure that everyone is prepared for what they're going into. So we're not in the business of selling, fantasy, right? So, a trip to Mongolia that's coming up in June is a little rougher around the edges than some of the other trips that we probably offered that look a little bit similar. But so we're very clear with potential clients and participants that this is the reality of the situation. So you need to take that into consideration.
Setting expectations, like you're not going to be staying in 5-star, 4-star hotels.
Yeah.
Prepare for this. There may be some critters here and there, or that kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that kind of stuff. So
now, what about if it's a long-term trip? What's the longest trip that you've taken? That you've been out in the field.
Well, so the longest trip that I've done as a personal trip was actually the first trip, and that was the crossing of Greenland.
Okay.
So we were close to 50 days, the three of us on the ice cap. Yeah.
Wow, almost 2 months.
And that's like bringing all your equipment, all your food, all your supplies and fuel, and then it was just the three of us for that amount of time. We didn't see anybody else.
And how do you pack for a long-term trip? I'm assuming you're washing things, while you're out there. So I would say most sort of pedestrian travelers are, I'm going to Vegas for 3 days. I need 3 pairs of underwear or 4 pairs of underwear. I need this, I need that, and then I'll do laundry when I come home. You don't have that luxury when you're going to be gone for 50 days, right? So what's the difference in the loadout?
Well, it's actually easier because I feel like a 7 or 10 day trip, you have to pack as if you need to be your best, most presentable self every day. If you're doing 50 or 60 days, 40 days, 30 days, at some point for the majority of the trip you're going to be filthy. So it's like less stress. You're not worried about like, Tuesday's outfit is this, because Tuesday's outfit is every day's outfit. So in those situations, for those kinds of trips, it's more about being comfortable and being safe.
Yeah.
So as long as you have, you may have to wear the same 2 pairs of pants every single day, but as long as those pants do the job and they keep you dry and warm, it doesn't really matter.
It doesn't really matter. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah. So that's, I mean, and then like the real trick, the hack is that you always have whatever you show up with, the last port of call or airport, basically you're looking somewhat presentable.
Oh, okay.
And then you keep that in the bottom of your bag, and you don't touch those clothes again until you get back into civilization.
Oh, so you're returning in the same basically you're returning the same way you arrived, in the same clothes and all that. Okay, yeah.
Unless something happens and there's just like Lord of the Flies, and you've ended up wearing those dress pants as a face shield for something, but.
That's cool. You probably, dude, I know you have adventure stories to tell. What about communication? Because, we live in this world of constant communication, social media. People are posting online every 5 seconds, or, staring. I think they said that the average person looks at their phone like 200 or 300 times a day. That's not always possible when you're
scary numbers.
Yeah, it's probably pedestrian, right? So that's not always possible when you're in the middle of Antarctica or somewhere remote like that. What are your guidelines for your workshop attendees in terms of communication?
Most people are okay with, like, because there's usually always a point of contact, or a point during the day at least, where people can get online in some form. Antarctica is a little bit different in that there is absolutely no cell service, but I mean, satellite phones and two-way messaging devices like what is the name of that company? It used to be Garmin. Mm-hmm, So there are devices that you can, like, two-way text and things like that operate off satellite feeds, satellite services. And then in other places like Greenland and Mongolia and places like this, they're not so remote and so far removed that there isn't at some point a connection or cell service. You may have to, like, hike to the top of something huge, or you might have to wait until you're back in town. That's after like a couple days of not being in town. But over the course of 12 or 14 days, there are going to be multiple opportunities to stay in touch. So I think, again, it's like letting people know up front that this is the scenario, so that nobody's, like, completely destroyed when they find out that they can't update their, Twitter and Instagram feed every 45 minutes.
Do you have people that go through those sorts of withdrawals that, while they're out there, like, it's an emergency, I have to update my Instagram right now or I'm going to die? Like, has that ever happened?
I've never seen anybody, like, completely fall apart, but I mean, I know myself personally, I've been on some trips where the first 3 days just feel like a real detox. And I mean, I look forward to it, but it's also a little bit rough because there's always this, like, sort of nagging feeling in the back of your mind that you're not doing something that you're supposed to do. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of gotten to that point. Yeah, exactly. Like, it's gotten to that point where you start to miss the action of checking your phone, and it's like anything else that you come to be a bit, dependent or reliant on. If you take it away, you're not really sure what you're missing, but something's not right. So I know that I have that feeling every once in a while. So I'm sure the participants do as well. But for the most part, people are kind of looking for that too. Like, I think they they joke about, like, wanting to get online or do this or do that right away, or post this picture they just got of a cool sled dog puppy or whatever. But usually people are having a pretty good time in the moment, and they're there for that reason, and they kind of have their head wrapped around it.
You have an excuse to unplug and not have to respond and post everything that they're doing, right?
It's like, they're kind of doing it as a way to I don't know, like, give us all or themselves permission to go offline for a bit, which is pretty great, because then the whole group sort of acts as a group, and it's, it's not a group that's feeding everything back out into the universe and waiting for, like, feedback from them, right? It's just us. In that place, which is really, really cool.
Love that. I love that. Well, we're getting close to the end here. I don't want to skip over you have an upcoming trip. We mentioned, I think, in the beginning that you're heading out to Antarctica and you're taking a group of people to Antarctica. You want to talk about your preparations for that trip and what your expectations are for that adventure?
Yeah, so that trip is with a company called One Ocean Expeditions, and they're basically a travel tour. Well, they're one of the travel tour operators that operates in Antarctica and other parts of the world. Um, and they bring clients down. And then on these sailings, there will sometimes be space for different workshops or symposiums. So what I'm there doing with four other photographers through this company called Offbeat Photo is we're offering a photo symposium on one of these sailings. Mm-hmm. So we'll be down there with them for the length of the trip, giving talks and presentations and bringing people out on guided tours of different parts of Antarctica and the things and the sites and, the icebergs, penguins, whales, stuff like that.
That's cool.
Yeah. And so preparing for a trip like that, because it's somewhat of a cooperative effort, we really are there to handle anything and everything that has to do with photography, and experiencing the place from that perspective.
Yeah.
So it's slightly different than other trips that we'll run or I've run in the past, where I'm much more of a guide that also deals with like where everyone's going to eat today and accommodations and things like that. So that stuff's a little bit different with this particular trip because that's being handled by the group that runs the boat.
So you get to focus on the photography side exclusively and let those guys handle all the logistics and meals and planning and all that cool stuff. Is that a direction that you're going to take for future workshops? That sort of split, or in other words, which do you prefer? Handing that stuff off to a third party, or do you prefer doing it yourself and being the guide that's also the instructor?
I kind of like both, to be honest. I mean, the thing about these trips, the sailing to Antarctica, is there are a lot of people, and not everyone's specifically part of the photo symposium. Some people are down there, with their own agenda and their own plan, so they'll follow the programming that's available on the ship. So it's nice to have, because with that many people, it's nice to have another group that's handling logistics. But with smaller groups, 10 or 12 or 15 people and a couple of guides / instructors, it's actually quite nice to just travel with a smaller footprint and kind of like deal with and be on call and on hand and to do some of the other fun stuff, because I actually do enjoy guiding as well as teaching. So
yeah. And what are some upcoming workshops that you have on the schedule?
So right now I'm in Newfoundland, which is actually where the province that I'm from in Canada. Okay. And I'm back here visiting family, but also trying to put together workshops for the following upcoming years. So I have one coming up actually in May with Renee Robin. And that's going to be in Newfoundland. Mm-hmm. So newfoundshores.com is where those workshops will be listed. But so that's more of an environmental portrait workshop.
And that's newfoundshores.com?
Yeah.
I'm going to bring
and
that
then
up.
And then I also...
Okay.
Yeah, you got it.
Got it. Boom. Okay. For those that are listening, I'm bringing up the website live here. Okay, here we go. Newfoundshores.com.
Yeah. So there's two on the schedule for this summer, one in May, and then a sort of a landscape tour in a place called Bona Vista in August. So those are the two that are coming up in Newfoundland. Before that, I'm going to be in Mongolia in June with the Offbeat crew. And then in September, I believe, I'll be in Greenland.
Wow. Wow, you're all over the place, man. Like, what does your year look like? Like, how much are you home versus not being home? What's the split? And is
I
there a
guess it
home?
depends on your definition of home. Yeah,
I was gonna say, because I have some photographers that say, well, I don't like. One of the photographers I just interviewed was saying that what was the phrase that he used? Voluntarily homeless. Well, he doesn't,
Yeah.
he gets mail, and so I guess you could technically say he has an address someplace, so that's where he gets his mail. But he's on the road for, 2/3 or more of the year. Are you similar?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. You definitely feel like some years more comfortable in like airports and waiting rooms and bus stations than I am at home. But I technically have a house and a home on the East Coast here in Newfoundland. That's where the mail goes, and I get to have that little panic attack twice a year when I come home and check the pile that's,
to make sure it's still there.
Falling off the table onto the floor.
Wow, that's amazing. It sounds like a dream. I mean, do you ever feel like, since you're on the road so much, that you're wasting money paying for either mortgage or rent or whatever at the quote unquote home?
Sometimes that comes up, yeah, and then I go down that rabbit hole of figuring out, well, what can I do to change this? Do I sell the place, or do I get somebody else in there? And every time I come back, and if I'm here for 4 weeks or 6 weeks or something like that, it seems to be like just enough time to make me feel like, no, I actually need this little anchor.
Yeah.
In the ocean of travel. Like, this actually does a lot for me.
Yeah.
To be able to, have a place to put books and, know where.
Yeah, just a place to come back to. Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it seems like it'd be, I don't know, but it seems like it would be really stressful to be constantly floating and not have the option of just saying, you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm not, for 2 months I need to go rest, or I don't feel well. I just want to go check out and be myself at my place, and then go back on the road again, right?
Yeah, and for me, it's great here because it's a coastal city with like amazing, hiking and camping, and I'm back here now, and we're building workshops for the following year, and we're going to be, hopefully, those will be here in Newfoundland as well. So more and more, I'm trying to build workshops that also sort of give me a reason to come back and spend a little more time here, even though I'll be working and some of these workshops are not in my house and I'll be staying in different communities or parts of the province and stuff like that. Yeah. It's still like another opportunity to come home and see family and stuff like that. So, and trying to like push projects, like I'm here also in the hit or miss season of ice climbing on the East Coast. So, there's a project that I've been wanting to do with local ice climbers here for a while. So if I don't come home, sometimes, that stuff never gets done. So
yeah, that's so cool. Congratulations on all the stuff that you're working on and living the dream and having the courage to pull the trigger and live the dream, right?
Yeah.
That's that hump that I would imagine a very large percentage of the global population never gets to. It seems to be that dream that's just over the horizon, and I'll do that one day, and I'll do that one day, and then suddenly you can't do that, and it becomes a regret, and now you actually pull the trigger and you're living that dream and running the planet and having a great time doing it and making some awesome images as well. So
thank you.
Yeah, making images and memories is what it's all about, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, so if people want to catch up with you, they want to look at your stuff, they want to sign up for a workshop or just follow you online, what's the best way to do that?
The best way would be, my website is curtisjonesphoto.com, which would basically like link to almost everything else that I have out there. But the workshop website currently for workshops that I'm working on and pushing is newfoundshores.com.
Okay, newfoundshores.com. And that's what we were showing before. That's this site right here.
Exactly.
Yeah, Newfound Shores.
And and on basically Instagram is probably the easiest place to follow me, like socially. And for Instagram, it's at cjonesphoto.
cjonesphoto. Very cool. Look at this. I'm looking at the description for your the environmental portraits at St. John's. Bill. So this is the one that you're doing with Renee Robin, correct?
Correct.
Yeah, Renee Robin. So styling, location, lens choices, and camera settings, light, natural strobe, shade, flashlight, posing. I love this. This is cool.
I'll be doing all the Photoshop stuff. Renee's not really going to have anything much to say about there, but...
Wait, really?
No, absolutely not.
I was going to say, surely you jest there, Curtis.
Oh, yeah. I have a great slide whenever we happen to be presenting in the same place, where I Photoshopped a bunch of penguins into one of my landscapes, just to prove to people that that's something I should never be paid to teach.
There you go. Yeah, use the right tool for the right job. Renee's a Photoshop master. So
yeah.
Really cool. Well, thanks, man. Thanks for coming on and chatting.
No, thanks for having me.
No, this is fantastic. And if you don't mind, I'd love to know so you're heading out to Antarctica. I want to check back with you after that trip and see how things went, and what went right, what went wrong, if anything, and maybe check out some images for that trip. Are you game for that?
Oh, 100%. I'll have lots of stories.
Awesome. Cool. All right. We'll check in with you then. Curtis Jones, man, thank you. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much.
All right. Take care.
Bye.
This is TWiP.